Have you ever just lost something valuable? It can be a hugely stressful experience, knowing you had something one moment and lost it the next. But it happens regularly, and not just with everyday items like your keys. Just imagine for a second that you lost something priceless, something almost irreplaceable. Keep watching to find out curious cases of the 10 most mysterious objects that vanished without a trace.
Amazing!
Number 10. Flight 19. This vanishing happened at the end of 1945 over the incredibly infamous Bermuda Triangle. 5 Grumman TBM Avengers were running a routine assignment named Navigation Problem 1, which was an exercise involving bombing and navigation. Radio conversations confirmed that the pilots had finished their exercise, as one of them asked permission to drop the last bomb. They began to make their way home, but slowly realized that they couldn't pinpoint exactly where they were. As the day slowly turned to night, air bases were alerted that there was a group of 5 planes that were lost, and a squad was sent out to look for them. From the reports of the planes' locations prior to their disappearance, combined with the conversations between the original flight and the flying boat that was sent out to look for them, investigators' only reasoning for the disappearance of the group of pilots was that the PBM aircraft were prone to accumulating flammable gasoline vapors, and so they must have exploded mid-flight. However, this is the only reason they could find, and it still isn't proven. It's also extremely unlikely that all 5 planes disappeared on the same operation due to such an error, and so the official reason for the disappearance is unknown. Number 9. James Bond's DB5. Goldfinger was a smash hit film around the world. People couldn't get enough of the suave and super cool James Bond character, and what a lot of people loved about the film was Bond's DB5. It was an amazing car, designed of course by Aston Martin specifically for the Bond film. It boasted bulletproof windows, revolving license plates, and perhaps the most famous aspect of the car, an ejector seat. The car enthralled moviegoers as it amplified Bond's gadgetry, yet this fame was not without its price. Aston Martin produced 2 cars for the filming of Goldfinger, one normal one, and one effects car with the Bond features built in it. Surprisingly enough, after production had wrapped up, the car was stripped of its special features and sold as a normal DB5. However, a buyer reinstalled its effects at a later date. It was in 1997 when the car was stolen from an airport hangar where it resided. After an extremely exhaustive search was implemented to try and salvage the car, it was then confirmed that the car was completely lost, and the insurance company reportedly paid out $4 million, an extremely big price tag that would shock even Mr. Bond himself. Number 8. Queen Victoria's parliamentary mace. If you've ever watched footage of British MPs discuss politics and legislation in the Houses of Parliament, you'll know that it's an incredibly big deal with a lot of old archaic traditions still upheld since Parliament began. One of these traditions is a golden mace that is laid along the table between the 2 parties as they quibble about how to run the country. If you see any footage of the houses, then you will see this mace in all its glory. But did you know that the mace that was placed in Parliament when Queen Victoria was in power was stolen? In the early hours on Friday the 9th of October in 1891, someone snuck in and swiped the mace. Upon learning of this, an inquiry into the crime immediately begun. A lot of suspicion rested on Parliament member Thomas Jeffrey, who was seen running from the houses with a large package on the afternoon of the incident. Though after police turned his house in Abbotsford upside down looking for it, it was confirmed that he was not to blame. There was even rumors that the mace had been taken by a group of MPs and placed in a brothel in a little prank that had gone completely wrong. But its real whereabouts remains a complete mystery to this day. Number 7. Honjo Masamune. There are many versions of this particular story, but what we can be certain of is the facts. Goro Nyodo Masamune was widely renowned as one of the greatest swordsmiths in Japanese history, making swords all the way back in the 13th century. The most famous sword he made was named the Honjo Masamune after an incredibly powerful Japanese warrior. It is believed to be one of the finest Japanese swords ever made, having gained a legendary status. This sword was passed around from samurai to samurai until ending up in possession of the Tokugawa dynasty for quite some time. Upon Japan losing the Second World War, enemy forces told families they would have to relinquish their swords to them as souvenirs of war. Though many families deemed this unacceptable, Tokugawa Ieyasu handed his sword over to a man allegedly named Koriba Moore. Ever since that fateful day, the fate of the Honjo Masamune has been cloaked in mystery. The name of the soldier that took the sword does not show up on records, and though a number of samurai swords have been discovered over the years, none of them have turned out to be this legendary weapon. Number 6. George Washington's teeth. It's safe to say that George Washington didn't brush that often. Most people know that he didn't have many of his original teeth, leading to the myth that he wore wooden teeth. However, the actual dentures he wore were made of materials such as gold and ivory, and it was even reported that at the time of his inauguration as US President, he only had one tooth. According to a New York Times article, the dentures were discovered missing in 1981. The Smithsonian began searching intently and felt that the blame would most likely land on one of their own employees. A year later, in the middle of 1982, the bottom set of teeth were found locked away in an extremely secretive storeroom, deep within the Smithsonian's walls. Detectives believe that this move points squarely towards an inside job by someone from their workforce. Ever since this day, the uppers have been missing, with no clues as to their whereabouts at all. What is so strange about this case is that the teeth themselves do not have much materialistic value, and they believe the perpetrator might have taken the teeth to melt down the gold in them to sell, making an incredibly minuscule amount of money in doing so. A spokesperson for the Smithsonian, upon finding the lower dentures, commented that it's definitely better to have half than none at all. Number 5. SS Poet. The SS Poet was an extremely important ship for America during World War II, transporting troops until 1949. It remained useless for a while after being sold to a Hawaiian company as a bulk cargo liner in 1979, and in 1980 the ship left its dock to travel to Egypt on a routine transfer of corn. Though the ship's captain noticed that it was slightly heavy at the very front of its bow, he concluded it was nothing to worry about and continued his journey. Its last ever transmission was received at 8:30 a.m. as it passed Camp Henlopen. There was reported to have been a very abrupt emergency signal received at a port in Baltimore 2 days after the Poet had launched, though there was no way to ascertain whether it was sent by the boat in question, but if it was, the signal came from the very edge of the Sargasso Sea, from in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. Though there are theories that unprotected tankers could have caused the ship to explode, among other possible explanations, due to the sudden loss in communication with the Poet. To this day, investigators have been scratching their heads over this one. Number 4. Faberge eggs. These are far from the sort of eggs you boil in a pan and serve with toast. These are jewel-encrusted eggs made by the House of Faberge. The most famous of them are the ones given to Russian Tsars Alexander III and Nicholas II to gift their wives and mothers for Easter. Out of the 50 that were produced, 7 are missing at the moment. Some of the eggs' designs are completely unknown due to there not being a picture of them and are unlikely to ever be found. Among the lost eggs is the Royal Danish egg that contained 2 miniature portraits of Christian IX of Denmark and his wife Louise of Hesse-Kassel, and also the egg hen with sapphire pendant that was last seen in the Armory Palace of the Kremlin. Number 3. Amelia Earhart's plane. Amelia Earhart was one trailblazing lady. She was the first female to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean, and also the first to fly solo from Hawaii to California. She gained notoriety from around the world, including being invited to the White House, and she was beloved by many. In 1935, she joined the faculty of Purdue University to coach women on careers, and as a technical advisor to the aeronautics sector. Gradually, she began to plan a circumnavigation flight of the globe. She was funded in the attempt by the university, and chose to try and perform it in a Lockheed Electra 10E. After a few attempts failed, she left on what was to be her final attempt. In an attempt to fly from Leh to Honolulu, trouble began to occur surrounding the communication and flight tracking systems used to judge where Earhart was and vice versa. Communication became spotty, and the people tracking her became completely confounded as to where she was. Search efforts began shortly after the disappearance, scouring the islands between her takeoff and destination, but nothing was found. And her plane remain missing until this day. Number 2. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. This one happened as recently as 2014 and should be fresh in the memory of anyone that watches the news. On the 8th of March, a Boeing 777 took off from Kuala Lumpur to reach its destination in Beijing. After a few hours in the air, the plane disappeared from air traffic controller screens, vanishing inexplicably. The plane continued to show up on military trackers, and it seemed to deviate from its original pathway. After another hour, the plane then completely disappeared. After a lengthy search, it was confirmed by the Malaysian president that the plane had got lost over the Indian Ocean, but no further explanation was given. This had led to investigators and members of the public alike coming to their own conclusions, with theories such as North Korea hijacking it, America taking it and flying it to the US, a crew suicide pact, and Rupert Murdoch even suggested that jihadists were behind it. Despite a large amount of theories, nothing is confirmed. Number 1. The Ark of the Covenant. There are some lost things that are so important, finding them would bolster a huge amount of religious history, and also provide their owners with one of the most priceless historical artifacts in the world. One of these objects is known as the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is a golden box that, legend has it, houses 2 stone tablets, upon which the 10 Commandments of the Lord are inscribed. The biblical account maintains that the box was made with a pattern given to Moses directly from God, when him and the Israelites were at the foot of Mount Sinai. It is also said to contain the rod of Aaron, brother of Moses. Not much about where the box is can be garnered from biblical texts, leading to there being a massive number of theories on where it might be, from Tutankhamun's tomb to an estate in Warwickshire, England. Which disappearance do you find the most mysterious? And do you think any of them will be found? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.